right, we're finishing chapter 11, 12? I don't know. We left off and Ben was getting all mad because somebody had come looking at the boat and he thinks his dad's selling the boat. The yacht broker. I had some questions about him, like, was he really tall? And was he wearing a dark suit? And did he have a long, thin face with deep-set eyes, dark hair, parted almost in the middle? And the answer to all those questions was yes. So, I'll bet you anything, there wasn't a yacht broker looking at your sailboat today. Wait, no? You think it was Lyman? Here, at our boat. Jill nodded. I'm sure of it. I described him exactly, and everything matches up. It's too big of a coincidence. He was here. Ben's face went pale, and he felt like he was going to fall over. Let's walk, okay? Jill steered him by his elbow off the marina's planks and onto the harborside path. Take some deep breaths. I'm okay, he said, pulling his arm away. It just creeps me out, that's all. I mean, do you think he was inside? Like, in my cabin? I don't know. Just keep walking. But how do you even think it might have been Lyman? Mostly a hunch. But it also was what you said about how your dad loves that boat. I mean, why would he sell it? Especially if he needs to live on it right now and then not even mention it to you. Doesn't make sense. Plus, I've had Lyman on the brain ever since I found all that stuff online. How come he's so focused on me? Like, what's he looking for? Is it just the coin? I don't think he knows anything for sure, which probably drives him crazy. We know Mr. Keene told Lyman something, and whatever that was, Lyman got worried, which means the people who hired him got worried too. So he was watching Keene like a hawk, trying to find out if he really knew about something that could mess up the deal. And suddenly the old janitor dies, and who's the last person he talks to? Me, said Ben. Exactly. And Lyman knows that Keene might have told you something, or even handed you something, which of course he actually did. And then, after school yesterday, when Lyman asked you about your time with the old guy, you acted funny. So he got even more suspicious. And now you're his new target. Congratulations. Jill glanced casually back over her shoulder. He might even be watching us right now, and he could have been listening too. Ben stopped and whipped around to face her. Microphones on the boat. He could have heard everything we just said. Again, gently, Jill steered him forward. Can't do anything about that now. If it happened, it happened, and he would know that we found something. But he doesn't know what or where we got it. And we didn't read the message out loud, so we need to keep acting like nothing's weird, nothing's wrong, like we have no idea he was here. Or that he's even watching you. And if your place is bugged, and we know it is, but he doesn't know we know, then that's good for us. Weird. And a little scary, but good. Ben was walking so fast now that Jill almost had to trot to keep up. But how did he get over here this morning? He was at school. I saw him in the library during second period. There was a wake for Mr. Keene today from 11 to 1, and his funeral is on Monday. You need to pay attention to the announcements during homeroom, Benjamin, and slow down. They walked the rest of the way to Jefferson Street in silence. When they got to the door of her building, Jill said, If you want to come in for a while, you can, until your dad gets home. Ben put his hands in his pockets, and his right hand closed around the gold coin. No, I'm okay. It's not like Lyman's a maniac or something, just a skinny industrial spy. And we know more about him than he knows about us. Ben was quiet a few seconds. Is there any way he could tap into my email? She shook her head. Not if your firewall's on. Good, because I won't be calling you from the boat unless we work out something that we want him to hear, but we don't really know yet if he's listening. I mean, we really don't know much of anything right now. Ben shook his head. Maybe we're making way too much out of all this stuff." Another few moments of silence, and then he spoke more slowly. "But I don't think so. If there was even a tiny possibility that something could stop this deal, that would be a nightmare for the Glenlee Company. It'd cost them millions, probably cause huge lawsuits, all kinds of trouble. So if there's any chance something could wreck it, they'd have to investigate, even if it's just a couple of kids poking around." "Well, I think we're on to something big here," said Jill, a grim smile on her face. "We're not just a couple of nosy kids either, because we're not in this thing alone, not by a long shot." "Yeah," Ben said with a smirk. "There's the two of us, the 3 dead kids, the dead janitor, and the dead sea captain. Quite a team." "Be serious, Ben." "Oh, I am. Really. I'm being very serious. But you have to admit this is completely strange. And we're just barely getting started." Jill shifted gears, thinking ahead. "So be sure to email me the text from that copper plate this weekend, okay?" "Yep. And I expect you to have all 5 of those clues completely decoded by Monday morning." "Very funny." Jill paused a moment, then looked Ben in the eye. "And we're not telling anybody about this, right?" "Absolutely," he said. "At this moment, there are exactly 2 keepers of the school. You and me." "That's right," said Jill. "We, the children." Chapter 13, Clean Start. It was 1:15 on Saturday afternoon, and Ben was sorry he hadn't invited Jill to come watch him race. The conditions were perfect. A brisk offshore breeze blowing from the west, a mix of clouds and sun, a light chop to the water, and almost no swell. 24 kids had signed up to race, but since a lot of them didn't own their own boats, there would be 2 races, with 12 boats each. Ben was glad to see his name on the list for the first race, but Robert Garrett was in the first race too, so there was no way to avoid a direct showdown today. Among the intermediate sailors, he and Robert had the most experience, and last season's race tally had ended in a draw. 7 first-place finishes for each of them, and 7 second-place finishes. They were racing in Optimists today, which was fine with Ben. Some other local clubs had their intermediate sailors race in 420s, which needed a crew of 2. Ben liked the stubby little dinghy because it had a crew of 1, him. Optimists are a kind of boat. It's just a little sailboat that one person can do all by themselves. The club owned 10 Optimists, and like the other kids who didn't have boats of their own, Ben pulled a number from a bag for his boat assignment. He drew number 9, one of the newer ones, so its hull still had a smooth factory finish on it, and smoother meant faster. Sweet. At the gear inspection on the beach, Ben kept busy with his own preparations, and he was glad Robert was about 30 yards away. He had his own boat this year, a brand new one, and he'd made a point of telling Ben all about it. But as he worked, Ben couldn't avoid noticing Robert's boat. It was the only boat on the beach with the big Olympic-sized letters and numbers on its sail, USA 222. Since the water was just 43 degrees, it's really cold water, the race advisor walked around and double-checked each boat and also made sure that each sailor had warm, waterproof clothes. And even if you had aced the swimming test, a bright orange life vest was mandatory. Ben tied down each of the 3 airbags in his boat and then tightened the hiking straps, the broad nylon bands he'd have to hook his feet under when he leaned out over the edge of the boat. And by the looks of the white caps on the waves out there, there'd be plenty of that today. Even though the wind felt chilly and it was beginning to cloud up, his new dry suit kept him so warm that he had to unzip his jacket. But it would feel a lot different out on open water. Still, he felt like he was ready for anything, especially since his dad had surprised him at breakfast today with some new insulated gloves. As he pulled on the halyard line to raise the sail, he glanced up the beach toward the clubhouse. He spotted his dad's red windbreaker right away, up on the deck outside the dining room. And then he saw his mom, too, except she was out near the end of the pier. He felt a stab of disappointment. Last summer, they had watched every race together. He snapped his eyes back to the mast and gave a sharp yank on the halyard, then fastened the line. And as he did the final tuning of the sail, he pushed everything else out of his mind. It was race time. Today's course was simple, and Ben fixed it in his mind as the race advisor helped him push his boat off from the beach and fasten his tiller in place. There were just 2 markers out there, and they were only about a quarter mile apart. After crossing the start line at the southern buoy, he'd have to sail to the northern marker, turn his boat around into the wind, scoot back, and go around the southern marker. Make one more run up to the northern buoy and sail around it a second time to reach the finish line. Here's what it looks like. So he starts here and he goes around the north, comes back around the south buoy, and then goes back around the north buoy to the finish line. So he kind of does a loop and a half. The race officers were watching and scoring the race today from 2 motorboats, one near the start line and the other near the finish. Some of the spectators, the watchers, were out on the water in their own boats, well outside the course, but still a lot closer to the action than the parents and friends watching through binoculars from the shore, like his parents. As his little boat slapped and skipped its way toward the starting buoy, Ben felt a sudden surge of happiness. He loved being out on the water, and he also loved that his mom and dad were watching him. Both of them. So what if they weren't standing side by side? This was the first thing they'd done together since they separated. Well, sort of together, which was tons better than not together at all. But he couldn't let himself think about anything like that or hope anything. He pushed it all out of his mind again because right now he had to make a clean start. He yanked in on the sheet, the rope attached to the boom along the bottom of the sail, pulling in until it almost touched his chin. His boat shot forward into a gap just to the right of the southern buoy. The wind made the boat tip up, so Ben dug his toes down under the hiking straps and leaned way out over the edge. Freezing spray stung his eyes and water ran down his neck, but the hull leveled off and sliced a sharp line through the waves, and that was all that mattered. Ben was on a port tack, and sure enough, someone screamed, "Starboard!" demanding the right of way. He adjusted his tiller and grazed past the other boat with about a foot to spare. Close call, but it was always like that at the start of a race, especially in a strong breeze. He took a quick look over his shoulder at the race officer's motorboat to see which flags were up. The Optimist class flag plus the preparatory flag, a white rectangle on a blue field, which meant there were about 4 minutes until the start. The next long blast from the air horn would be at the 1-minute mark when the prep flag was lowered. Crunch time. Ben knew this race would probably be won or lost right at the starting line. He had to be crossing the line just after the Optimist flag was dropped and the air horn sounded the start. Cross that line 1 second too soon and he'd have to take a penalty turn, which meant he'd play catch-up for the rest of the race. As he battled the 11 other kids who were trying to do exactly the same thing on the small patch of water, Ben felt like he was in a bumper car arena, except flapping sails kept blocking his vision, and a collision would mean a penalty. Ben gritted his teeth to keep them from chattering, let the sheet run loose, and jammed the tiller stick hard to starboard, which whipped the boat into a quick turn more than 90 degrees. He scrambled to the other side of the boat, then ducked as the boom went zipping up by over his head. He took up the slack on the sheet rope, and now he was on a starboard tack. He eyed the little flag at the top of his mast to check the wind direction again, then looked under the sail to see if Robert was anywhere nearby. Sure enough, boat number 222 was also running on a starboard tack, just to leeward and about 3 lengths ahead. Robert must have spotted him too, because he yelled out across the water, "Hey, Pratt, you might as well head for shore. I own this course." Talk like that could have earned Robert a penalty, but Ben ignored it. He watched his trim, watched his course, watched the round red buoy, watched the boats milling around him on all sides. Everybody was trying to be in the right spot at the right moment for that flying start across the line. He grabbed the scoop bailer and tossed a few quick quarts of water overboard just as a big wave sloshed another burst across the bow. There he is sailing his boat, getting ready for the race to start. His shoes were full of seawater and his feet felt like popsicles. But if freezing slosh was the price he had to pay for a great wind, bring it on. This was sailing. Ben let his boat slip a little downwind, then swung it around again and beat toward shore, looped back again toward the starting buoy, and then pulled it around once more, now sailing away from the starting line. Reep! At the long blast from the air horn, Ben punched the waterproof timer strapped to his wrist, then looked astern and got a fix on that beautiful big red buoy. His timer was counting down from 60. When it reached 30 seconds, he'd swing the boat around one last time and shoot northward again, reaching the line just as the Optimist flag dropped. At least that was the plan. Gusts and lulls, boats windward and alee, right-of-way conflicts, so many things could mess up the start, not to mention Robert. 32, 31, 30. Ready about! He jammed his tiller, released the sheet, and executed a perfect turn. Now he had a clear shot, straight to the line and just leeward of the first mark. He gave the sheet a tug, adjusted the tiller, and zipped toward the start. Clear! Clear! Number 9! Keep clear there! Ben ducked his head to see beneath his sail number 222, Robert. He had gotten his boat just barely even with Ben's, and since Robert had the leeward boat under Rule 11, Ben had to give way in order to keep clear. Ben has the black pants. A flash of anger made him wish he could draw a sword from his belt and shout, "I'll see your blood for this, you curvy scur!" But this was civilized sailing, so Ben pushed his tiller away, barely a twitch, knocking his boat a few degrees off its perfect course. And the moment he did that, Robert edged his boat up close underneath him again and yelled the same thing. "Clear! Keep clear!" Again, Ben had to give way, steering that much closer toward the marker buoy. He knew exactly what Robert was doing. 2 more adjustments like that, and Ben would be forced to either come about or sail to the left side of the buoy. A disqualified start. "Clear! Keep clear!" Robert bellowed, edging his boat up so close underneath him that if Ben had let out his sail, the boom would have whacked Robert on the back, which he was very tempted to do. Ben gave way again, but this time he pushed off tiller far enough so that a big gulp of wind spilled off his sail, and instantly Robert's boat slipped ahead by a full length. Then Ben pulled his tiller back the other way, cinched up his sheet, and 5 seconds later he was the one in the leeward spot just underneath Robert's sail. "Keep clear," Ben yelled. "Rule 11, keep clear!" And now it was Robert who had to angle off his course as their boats plunged and bucked toward the starting line side by side. The timer on Ben's wrist beeped just as the air horn wailed, "Reep!" and they both squeaked past the buoy. 2 fair starts, with Robert barely a half a length ahead. A blast of spray from the other boat's bow hit Ben in the face, but he shook it off with a grin. This was a race. His hands were already stiff and cramped from the cold, and he was glad his first run toward the northern marker was a simple reach. With the wind steady and mostly from behind, he felt it was safe to fasten the rope in a cleat so he could let go and flex his aching fingers. But moments later, the wind began gusting, forcing him to make constant adjustments to keep the boat sailing at its best speed. When he wasn't leaning backward out over the water to keep the boat from heeling over too far, he used one hand to bail out another gallon or so of water, always trying to keep the tiller steady so that the sail would stay at the perfect angle to the wind. Even though Robert was doing all these same things, Ben still kept directly behind him as they neared the northern mark. He was already incredibly alert, but seeing that bobbing red buoy ahead sent a jolt of electricity through him. No cramped fingers, no frozen feet, no slashing spray. Nothing mattered now except the tiller, the sail, the wind, and the boat thumping and skittering ahead, because this next turn was crucial. And we are going to continue with our race next time. So Ben and Robert are battling to win this sailboat race right now. We'll have to see what happens.